Hey, thank you for your interest in LameJuice. LameJuice is a three-voice sequencer, a programmable logic module, and something akin to a quantizer, so it can be used in conjunction with another sequencer. Unlike most sequencers, it's completely stateless, meaning that the inputs and the switches completely determine the outputs. Also, unlike most sequencers, it has no knowledge of keys or scales or notes or these sorts of things, but rather it picks the notes to have the instruments play simply by multiplying fractions together. We'll get into how all that works in a second, but for now, just listen to this simple 64-step sequence that LameJuice is able to produce with no other help. Pretty cool. Alright, let's get into it. Hey! Okay, so now I'm going to show you a less than musical example of how LameJuice works. There are actually 4 steps to how LameJuice makes sequences and how LameJuice makes melodies. So you'll need to trust me that there's going to be a payoff at the end, because the first few steps are going to seem kind of abstract, but it all kind of works together and makes a sequence. Anyway, to assist me, I've got 3 Plats modules and a mix together going into a plateau reverb, good combo, and I've got some stuff for recording. I got my LameJuice, I got an LFO that I'm going to use for a clock, and I have a sequencer that we'll use later. So let's go ahead and get started. So let's start with the inputs. So on the left-hand side of LameJuice, I have 6 gate inputs. LameJuice is a sequencer, but it's not a step sequencer. It has no notion of steps. Instead, it's got 6 gate inputs. And the 6 gate inputs, since each one can be either low or high, that gives you 2 to the 6 possible different combinations of inputs. And you can kind of think of those 2 to the 6 or like 64 combinations of inputs as the different steps of the sequence. Obviously, going through all, 64 different combinations would be tedious, so I have some clever normalization where if you leave an input unplugged, it just becomes a clock divider of the one above it. So you can just clock the first input, and you can see the rest of them just kind of follow through, or you can send different sequences of gates to the different inputs and use it like that. For this example, I'm just going to do it like this, and this has the nice property that the lower ones, which we'll call D, E, F, are going to kind of move slower than the higher ones, A, B, C. Of course, there's still no sound. Cool. So LameJuice is a logic matrix. So, if you know about Instro Say, Stouffer A166, or all these other logic matrix, Clavis, whatever, then this will make sense to you. If not, I suggest you go learn about those sorts of modules. But basically, what you have is each row gives you a logic module. So this row of switches tells you which things should be part of the logic, and this switch tells you what type of logic you'd like. So let's say I want AND, so I want it to be high only if only if all of the inputs are high, and I want to do A and B. So if the switches are up, it means I want that input to be part of the logic. So this row reads as A and B, and the logic output, the gate output, comes here. So when both A and B are high, this will be up. If I switch to the downwards position, that means to negate it. So now I'm saying I want this output to be high if A is high and if B is low. And if you can see this, it's easier to tell with just one. So I'll say if A is low and of only one thing is just that thing itself. So if A is low, I want it to be high. And you can see it's the opposite of A. Each of these rows is the same in terms of being a logic matrix, so I can say, okay, if not A or B, so this can be high most of the time because it's an OR, and you see this one is flipping on and off at a different rhythm than that one, and of course I can get 6 different rhythms, and just to demonstrate, I'll do not A and D, so this does nothing when D is low, and when D is high, it flips on and off. So you can kind of use the higher bits to turn on and off different pieces of what will eventually make up your sequence. Of course, we haven't learned how to make a sequence from this yet, so there is still no sound. Okay, cool. So let's talk about the next step. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on one of the classes. That, of course, is not making any sound yet because there's no sounds to be made. But you'll notice that each of these is connected to a different interval. So I've got these 3 intervals here. Each of them are the same, and I have these switches. Top switch corresponds to the top interval, bottom switch to the bottom interval, middle switch to the middle interval. But they're all in the off position, so it's not making any sound. Let's go ahead and flip this A on, so this is turning on and off with A, and set this to a perfect fifth. Cool, it's doing a perfect fifth. If I set it to a major third, it does a major third. Let's keep it here for now. I've got 3 intervals, so if I go ahead and set this one to a major third, then that does nothing because nothing is attached to that top interval, but if I set this to the top interval, now it is. Okay, so, cool, that's not a very good melody, but let's see what happens if I set this to a major third. Nice. So, whenever this one is high, it goes up by a fifth. Whenever this one is high, this one is B, or B, but that's just B. I can change the rhythm by doing different sorts of logics. You would think. Okay, cool, whatever. Also, if I set these both to be, if I set them both to be the same, so they're both going into the middle interval now, you can see that I'm getting, whenever they're both high, I go up by 2/5, all the way up to D. Whenever only one of them's high, I go to G, and if both of them are low, I'm at C. So I have a nice little Pythagorean melody. Let's go ahead and set that back. Okay, cool. So I can generate kind of very repetitive melodies like this. You'll notice that there is no CV control over these, but that's fine because I can just use more logic. So I'll go ahead and set D to be to go up a fifth. And now we have like something that almost sounds like a 2-chord progression. I never said what chords to use, I never said anything like that, but it kind of sounds like we have a 2-chord progression in G major. And I could go further and say, actually, every third time I want you to go up even, by a step instead. So this is and of these 3 slowly moving ones, let's see when that turns on. Yeah, we get a different chord still. Again, this is a demonstrative example, so it's kind of very, very, on the grid rigid, but this is kind of how the thing works. And by adding more and more sophisticated interlocking logic combinations, you can get nicer and nicer melodies, or more sophisticated, more complex melodies. One thing I'd like to point out, this melody has 8 different notes in it. There's a C sharp over there, so this is almost fits in a G major scale, but this got an extra note. And we never told it we wanted to almost fit in a G major scale. We just kind of told it what intervals to stack. And it stacked those intervals, and, it gave us a melody. So this is very different than most sequencers where you say, I want to be in D harmonic minor, and it just snaps you to that scale, and that's where you are. In this one, the nearby notes will tend to be something coherent, but it's not necessarily that you're fixed to any scale. Another fun thing is you can say, okay, what would this sound like if it was in a minor key? And well, I can't flip it to a minor key, but I can change all my major thirds to minor thirds. Let's listen to how that sounds for a second. Yeah, cool. So one thing that is not the most important is that these notes that it's picking, they're not the same as the notes on the keyboard. This usually doesn't matter unless you care a lot about just intonation and these sorts of things. But when I say a perfect fifth, I really mean I want the frequency ratio 3/2. That is a just perfect fifth. A lot of times, picking these just frequency ratios doesn't really make any sense because, you know, it's like, oh, if I go up 2 of them, you know, G and then D, but, you know, if I go up 4 of them, then I get an E, but an E is a major third. Is that the same as going up a major third? And of course, it's not in just intonation. But because we've got this nice grid here, this grid is different than this grid, but because we're on this nice lattice, we are able to, like, you know, say, okay, if I go in this direction, I am multiplying the frequency by, you know, 3/2, and if I go in this direction, I'm multiplying the frequency by 5/4. And this also lets us do things like, let's take a more alien ratio, like here's 13/8, which, you know, that's not something you will find even close to on the piano. And actually, that's, in terms of Zen melodies, that's not totally crazy. I'll make it back to a major third for now, though. But yeah, so that's what those intervals do. You're not, the notes are not actually the notes that they say they are, but they're close enough that it doesn't matter. And they're more pure intervals if you're into that kind of thing. Okay, cool. So I promised that you'd be able to get 3 melodies, but if I turn, like everything I've described so far is only gives you 1 melody, right? So if I turn on the second plats, it's playing the same melody as the first one, which is not like that cool. It would be nicer if it was playing something different. It would be nicer if it was playing something related. And so this brings us to the idea of comuting. So, comuting is a very unique idea. I'm not aware of any other sequencer that does anything like this. But the idea is this. I'll do it, and we'll listen to it, and then we'll explain what it is. So, each voice, there's 3 voices. Each voice has a row of what's called comuting switches. The bass voice happens to be the middle row, so I flipped the first 2 inputs, I commuted them. What is the bass doing? It is playing, for each of these series of 4 notes, it's playing the lowest of those 4 notes. That's all it's doing. When it goes into the bigger chord change, yeah, it goes there. Okay, it's playing the lowest of the 4 notes. How does it actually work? Well, basically what it does is you're saying, commute the inputs. I'm not muting the inputs. I'm not setting the inputs to 0. Instead, what I'm doing is I'm saying, okay, with A and B, they can either both be up or down, right? So there's 4 different possibilities that they can have. So of those, that gives me 4 possible notes. And this switch here, there's 1 for each voice. The middle one corresponds to the middle one. I say, okay, of those 4 notes, pick me the lowest one. If I put this in the highest position, it now picks the highest of the 4 notes. So all comuting does is say, ignore those inputs, but among the values that you could get from those inputs, give me the lowest one, give me the highest one, give me one in the middle. And I'll go ahead and add in a second voice and have it give me a middle sort of one. And now we get these nice chords. And the cool thing also is that they're not guaranteed. I mean, this is a very rigid example, but in general, they're not guaranteed to change at the same time. And they're not guaranteed to go in the same direction. So you can get really cool counterpoint, like you saw in the first example, just by having, the same thing commuted and putting these knobs in different positions. I'll go ahead and uncommute B, so that this one can move a little bit faster. You'll find that these commuting switches end up being very playable. I like to map them to my MIDI controller, and you can kind of play them and make cool melodies out of them. I'll go ahead and leave that moving. Okay, so we have this kind of annoying fairy fountain melody here, but it is a melody, and we've got the commuting going on. And there's one more thing I want to show. So I'm going to mute everything but the bass for a second, and to demonstrate what happens. So let's see what happens if we commute everything. So you can try to guess what will happen. Okay, so if we commute everything, we're basically saying ignore all the inputs. Then, that gives us a 64-step sequence. Based on all those 64 steps, give me the lowest thing, or give me the highest thing. Or give me any of the things in the middle. So this commuting switch almost becomes something that you can sequence. This pitch interval CV becomes something that you can sequence, right? It's almost like a quantizer. It's not a quantizer. It's not picking the closest note. But higher voltages will give you higher notes, lower voltages will give you lower notes. And so I'll go ahead and turn everyone back on. I will undo the commuting here. I'm going to go ahead and for the first voice, I'm going to plug a sequence that I have. I'm going to take this square wave and plug it to the clock in over here. And I'm going to take this CV here, and I'm going to plug it into this here. So this is the interval, the CV input for this knob. Of course, nothing is commuted for the first voice, so it does nothing. But let's go ahead and commute the first two inputs. And it's doing something weird. I think it needs a reset input. So the thing I just did at the end there, where oh god. Okay, apologies. LameJuis does not have an end of cycle output or anything like that, but it does have 6 logic operations. You don't always need all of them, and it lets you set one of these things to off, right? So the lowest, I set this to the lowest one, which is off, and I set that to the reset input. Of this guy. That's kind of like your end of cycle output. Anyway, now this sequencer is controlling this knob, and that first voice just sounds an awful lot more melodic than it did before. I'm going to do the same thing with the second one. Now this is So this third voice only has A commuted. So this sequencer is only choosing whether I should pick the higher version of A or the lower version of A. So it's only picking between 2 notes, where these are picking between 4 notes. That's not bad. It's not the greatest thing ever. I mean, this is just for demoing, but it's a melody, and it's working. Cool. So that is the basics of LameJuice, and yeah, let's get to some more musical examples. Although I want to try. I really like the perfect fifth and the major second. I think that sounds very cool. Anyway, cool. Yeah, so I'll just demo some bigger patches and some other techniques I've been using, and then you can go download it and have fun with it if you think it's cool. Thank you. Okay, so this is just a neat patch that I wanted to share that had some ideas that I thought are cool, and yeah, let's get to it. Okay, so what do we got here? So first I've got this arc here. This arc, literally all I'm doing is I've got this sequence here and it's running at a divided by 6 with a reset. And so you get some notes. Let's detach this CV2 percentile and get rid of the delay and everything. So these are the notes that you get just from LameJuice. And then if I put that back, of course. So you get some notes from LameJuice and some notes from the thing running at a different speed. And running at a different speed, you still get the on-the-beat stuff, and it doesn't sound crazy. But I mean, it sounds very cool and funky. So for the second voice, I've got a Bernoulli gate. So I got this Bernoulli gate here, controlled by this VCA. And when it's down, again, I only get the changes from LameJuice. So I still get something all the time. But when it's up, I also get from this sequencer. And I can run the sequencer at twice the speed and play with the Bernoulli gate. Bernoulli gates end up making great controls with these because you can use them in a way where you never lose the important notes, but you still can kind of change how many other notes you want. Cool. And then also I've got these mini mapped and I'm using them so. Yeah, cool stuff. So this is kind of a nice example. I've got sort of an additive synthesizer here. So this is kind of a thing that you get to do with just intonation, where, yeah, let's turn off all the effects. It doesn't sound great without the effects. So I have 3 additive synthesizers here that are all going through one VCA, one filter, and the notes are coming from LameJuice, just using pretty traditional LameJuice stuff. And I just think it sounds so pretty. And then I can kind of change the parameters of the different additive synthesizers, and it kind of sounds like one voice. I mean, the delay, obviously is a delay, but because the things it gives me are just ratios of each other, it really gives the impression of oh, these are harmonics of the same thing. I just think it sounds so pretty. I'm of course changing each of these with a Bernoulli gate, so I can take my Bernoulli gates down and it stops moving. I can only move one of them. I can use that was using the Bernoulli gates in conjunction with the commute switches. Yeah, it's just nice. Okay, so we're back to something very similar to our first patch, but we're using a feature that I forgot to mention earlier. So we also have these interval CVs. So in addition to these intervals, you can also set the interval with any volt per octave signal. So here I have a bunch of different sets of possible intervals that we can use. Currently, this is the 12 EDO version. So this module lets you pick certain notes from certain EDOs, and I'm on 12 EDO right now. Cool. So let's actually see how different EDOs sound. So this is 31 EDO. What is this? This is 17 EDO. Sounds pretty nice. Oh no, this is 17 EDO. That last one was actually 19 EDO. Whatever. It doesn't matter that much. The point is, you can provide your own intervals, and then you can say, you can look on Zen, Wikipedia, or whatever, and you can say, okay, what is the closest thing I have to a quote-unquote fifth in, whatever EDO that you care about. And then, you can just use that as your fifth and say I've composed something in 17 EDO and this is what it sounds like. And it's probably the easiest way to do that, so you don't have to learn about how to compose in other EDOs. If that's the thing you're interested in. Oh, oops. Also note that if I don't know what notes you're using, these are just kind of intervals, I will start displaying the things in sets instead of as notes. But even when they were notes, they weren't 12 EDO notes, there was some other notion of notes. I also kind of want to just see what happens if we try something different. So this is, we've listened to this a whole bunch. So this, I've just switched my fifths with major thirds. try something weird. Let's try 11 again. And you can see over here, because we're displaying things in cents. Yeah, this column looks pretty good, because if it's close to 100, it's close to a 12 EDO note. But oh, 551? Damn, that's like right between, like, I guess a fourth and a tritone. Whenever I switch these, it takes like many seconds for my brain to switch keys. But yeah, you can find some pretty ugly things, but you can also find some pretty gorgeous things just messing with these or pounding other intervals do the thing. Okay, yeah, thank you for listening to this demo. And I hope you download LameJuice and enjoy it, and please, you know, email me, tag me on Instagram, all those lovely things. This is my first module release, and I'm happy with the weird sounds it's making. So thanks a lot. Bye.